Hello, good people. Welcome back. My name is Dr. Venus Evans Winters, also known as Dr. V. I am back. So the Fieldnotes of a Black Woman Scholar is back. Fieldnotes of a Black Woman Scholar. So writing what I like. Fieldnotes of a Black Woman Scholar. So when I say I'm back, meaning I'm back from the pandemic. Yes. So I actually took a break sometime after the quarantine was lifted, or, shelter in place, whatever we're calling it these days. And so the reason why I took a break, oh my gosh, there's so many reasons. I had to take a break from recording from the podcast for a few reasons, maybe a handful of reasons, but top of those reasons was just mental rest. So I was fatigued. I was battle fatigued. I was emotionally and physically tired. So just like many of you who are listening to this podcast, not only did I continue to labor during the pandemic, but I also chose to show up and be present for the most vulnerable people, those individuals in my family, those people in my communities, those people not only around the country, but around the world who needed what I had to offer. And what I mean by what I had to offer, I mean emotional support, intellectual support, spiritual and cultural support, but also I would say creative support. And so not only was I laboring in my paid labor pre and post pandemic, and I still continue to, but I also decided to take all of my skills as an educator, my skills as a mental health professional with a clinical background in trauma recovery, mindfulness, and culturally responsive practices, such as mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance, commitment therapy, all of those good things I decided to bring to my people at a time when we all needed it, right? When I say my people, obviously I mean young people, people of color, women, professional workers who were laboring while also trying to take care of their own family and friends. So in other words, I created self-care spaces. And so somewhere between 2020, 21, 22, 23, and now 24, let's just say to prevent burnout conscientiously, I wanted to prevent burnout. I had to acknowledge that I was certainly in need of rest, mental, emotional, psychological, and physical rest. But I think even more importantly, and that's the point of, relaunching, I don't know if I ever left, but relaunching Fieldnotes of a Black Woman Scholar, is that I also was tapped out of my creativity. So I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I was certainly tapped out. So somewhere between teaching advanced graduate students, working at a think tank where it's a part of my job to show up fully and to think about research, policies, social issues, I just was tapped out on the creative side. I also would say, when I say I was tapped out on the creative side, now keep in mind, I've published and dropped, a book or two. I was certainly still writing for academic journals. I was also, obviously writing for teaching purposes and for public presentation. But when I say creative, I mean that I just did not have the opportunity to make things like podcasts or post blogs or create, meaningful social media posts. But I'm back, and I want to spend this season of Write Like a Scholar, Fieldnotes of a Black Woman scholar, or I should say writing what I like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar, by just reinvigorating our spirit when it comes to creativity, inspiration, motivation, all things that might be situated under the large theme of meaningful healing and authenticity. So meaningful healing and authenticity. So self-authenticity, as well as, or I should say not just as well as, but meaning authenticity and how we show up in our healing, in our laboring, in our learning. So I do want to, in this particular podcast episode, I do just want to check in. I want to see where everybody is at. How are you thinking about your creative pursuits? How are you able to integrate healing with learning and labor? And so I do have some tips of my own that I would like to discuss. And so one thing that I want to discuss is how was I able to bounce back? And so how was I able to bounce back after the pandemic, after the quarantine, sort of, the quarantine, the sheltering in place, right? When all of us was fatigued and all of us were holding up two spaces at once. And I think one of those spaces was, how do I protect my own overall social, emotional, mental, and physical health? But also, how do I reclaim my right to heal in authentic and meaningful ways? So that's what I mean by authenticity. How do we show up for ourselves and how do we show up for others? But I again, like I want to say, so what has been my tricks of the trade? One thing I do want to say is, one revelation is my process has been to really show up in community. Yes. So I think that's really important. I know that we all are, again, once those doors open back up, those flood doors, after, they said COVID-19 was over, but the last time I checked, it's not over. But we have seen some shifts, and those shifts has certainly taken place in how we have taken place. Sorry. Again, I got to get used to being back here talking to my own self, my field notes, so to speak. So how do we now show back up for ourselves and others in ways that are meaningful and authentic? And for me, I would say being in community with other people. So I've still been, working with and trying to serve young people, youth. And I mean youth across spaces. I've been in schools, I've been in after school programs, I've been in online webinars, I've taught research and writing courses online. I've provided healing spaces in person as well as virtually. And I still have, thank goodness I still have. So we still have the Planet Venus Institute. We still have Planet Venus. And so Planet Venus Institute, of course, is the nonprofit that I launched a few years ago. And Planet Venus serves the purpose of educating youth, especially girls and young women of color, how to provide mental health education and advocacy alongside practices of self-care. So that's one thing that I've had going on in community. Also, I've been just trying to make sure that I am healing alongside other people who understand what it's like to be at the center right now of racial and racialized and gendered criticism, violence, at the crosshairs of racialized and gendered harm. But with that said, too, I've been able to rethink about or resituate creativity and meaningfulness in my life by not only being in community with other, people, but also intentionally based off these healing experiences in community, whether I was the facilitator or leader of this, or if I was simply a full participant in these community healing spaces. I've also decided to focus on play. So imagine that, focusing on play. So being in community is one way or one method that I've certainly found inspiration. But another focus of mine more recently has been in play. Yes. So I know that sounds weird, right? So do adults, 35 plus, 45 plus, do we play? I'm not sure if we all play. Maybe we all should be playing a little bit more, but that's what I'm here to talk about, is how do we play in intentional, authentic, and meaningful ways in order to inspire. How do we play with intent or intentionality? How do we play with intent and intentionality in meaningful and authentic ways in order to inspire, right? So for me, a part of my healing process or part of my healing rituals is to play. And so play looks different. Play looks like playing with my dogs. I have so much fun just tossing a ball to my dogs, whether that's tossing the ball in the house, 15, 20, 30 times. You all know how dogs are, especially those little dogs, about balls. But also it might look like going outside in the backyard and tossing the ball with them, or sitting down and watching them on the patio. Yes, I didn't build it myself, but I did have installed an entire patio sometime during the pandemic, and I needed a space where I could be outside and I could be in nature, and I love it, and I don't want to be away from it for too long these days, right? So I'm not going back to pre-pandemic ways of learning and laboring. So play has been big for me. Play may look like, again, playing with my dogs. It may look like playing with my adult children, and I'm playing games. Humor is really, really fun. I'm trying to smile more, even when I'm sitting and listening or walking or driving or talking. I try to at least have a smile on my face. And I'm talking about the smiles we used to wear when we were young, little girls and little boys, and we didn't care so much about impression management. So play has been really, really big for me. Another way that play may show up is that not only was I prescribing to my clinical clients coloring books, but I also bought a few grown-up coloring books for myself. And so I love when I can see beautiful, brilliant colors. And y'all know Crayola has the best crayons, let's be honest. So Crayola crayons, I'm not talking about the little generic ones that sometimes we would find, when our teachers or parents couldn't afford, those good crayons. I'm talking about the good waxy type crayons, Crayola. So brilliant colors, 64 pack, 94 pack. So I would buy crayons. I also bought color pencils and markers, and just spend time coloring. The other thing that I really, really got into as far as play is, just taking magazine pictures and things out of magazines, or something that's, for me, stands out. So I can actually be on the airplane and I'll just say, oh, I want this magazine, and I'll cut out an image or some words, and then I'll paste them in my journal. So that's a little different from vision boarding, because in this case, the play part comes in at, oh, I like the way that this looks. I'm going to cut it out and I'm going to paste it and I'm just going to doodle around it. I'm going to color on this page. I don't know, but we used to cut and paste all the time when we were little children. And I think that we've been robbed of play. So I'll be giving attention to that too in Fieldnotes of a Black Woman Scholar. So play also looks like vacationing and traveling. I'm not gonna lie, I used to hump, right? I think that I've been okay. I did okay. I've been successful in my first career as a professor. And now in my second career as a clinician, which I want to do more of, and we'll talk about that at some point. But play is also just traveling for fun, not just for work. I mean, traveling to sit up in a hotel room and order room service. It might look like laying by the pool, in the hot sun, burning my skin. But I will say I do wear SPF 30 or 50 before everybody starts saying, oh, you can't just sit in the sun. I'm going to sit in the sun. I am a sun person. Okay, I love the sun. The sun brings me energy. The sun brings me joy. The sun helps me naturally detox. I love the sun. So play might look like too, just sitting out, in the sand by the beach or walking. Or how about, how about play looks like playing, I don't know, dribbling a ball, but I don't know but play. I'm still figuring out play. I haven't been a little girl for a long time. So that's a part of the process, recovering. What does play look like that's not attached to some type of commodity? And so my process for recovering from the pandemic and healing from racial battle fatigue is certainly, again, being in community with other marginalized people, or just, people in general who are taking hits right now. But also play, just centering on play. And I mean childhood play. And also, this is the fun one. That's really, really weird. So I don't know if it's weird. I've always worked out. But after George Floyd was murdered while running in a neighborhood, after that, so when he was murdered, I was actively walking outside, jogging, etc., right? Or at least for short distances. But more recently, I've been giving attention to working out. And I mean, when I say workout, I meant more organized, more structured, more intentional, not just, hey, I don't have anything else to do today, let me work out. Or I want to lose weight this week, let me work out. No, I mean intentional, mindful working out. So now I have specifically started a routine of strength training. Yes, y'all. I started a routine of strength training. That's a little different because your sister, I'm a go-to. Your sister is a go-to cardio type person. But for almost a year and a half, almost 2 years, I've been more focused on strength training, and I love it. So strength training for me is a challenge. I'm a more petite person, so I don't easily build muscle, right? I don't tone up. I'm just petite. I was born petite. If you read my books, you already know this. I was born underweight. I was born short and small figured, okay? And so I remember back in high school, we would go to the weight rooms as track athletes, and I was a long distance athlete. And so I didn't have to throw up as much weights as other people. It just wasn't expected, But we would say, I was strong. I was, for my size, I was strong enough. But I always liked weightlifting, but not as hey, let's do this for an hour. It wasn't something that I loathed or hated. It was just something that it wasn't my go-to because I wasn't great at it. I wasn't awesome at it. But keep in mind, when you're focused on play and joy, you don't have to be awesome at something. You just want to do it because it does feel good, or it is a challenge. And so strength training for me, more recently, it is a challenge. It's not something that I'm naturally good at. It's not even something that I'm going to see quick results out of. So it's like another form of disciplining my mind, but also I can disconnect from the outcome. So almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years soon, I started strength training, and that has been certainly, it's obviously good for, I would say, my physical health, but it's also good discipline, especially when, working at a distance, working from home, being a solo entrepreneur, being a consultant, being an author, a writer, making sure that I'm providing space for other people, because it's disciplining. I love strength training, and I couldn't disconnect from the outcomes. So again, some of my methodologies, and hopefully we can talk more about this, or I can talk more about this, but being in community with others, like-minded people, intentionally focusing on play and being meaningful and authentic in how I play. Just, that little girl showing up. So play and joy, and also working out. So regularly, consistently. So in this case, when I say working out, not to lose weight or not trying to commit to any type of diet. Nope. Those days are over. That's pre-pandemic Dr. V. Okay. So post-pandemic Dr. V, working out and, reconnecting to my body, but disconnecting from expected outcomes, societal outcomes. So strength training. The other is endurance running. And so endurance running is something else that I've been focused on now for approximately 6 months. Yeah, 6 months or longer. So endurance running training has been really good for me. So I'm kind of I might associate this with play, mindfulness play, but I think the endurance running is very challenging. So I went from being able to, say, walk 20 or 30 minutes to jogging out of breath for 15 or 20 minutes to now running at a say 5K pace or 5K pace for at least an hour. And so some people are like, what is a 5K pace? Yeah. What that looks, let me translate. Okay, so a part of my endurance training, and I'm still learning, right? I'm still having fun with this. I'm still learning, is that with endurance racing or training, running, it's about how long can you stay on your feet. And so when I say, I'm kind of running at it for about 45 minutes to an hour at a 5K race pace, that means that I'm coming in somewhere between 11 minutes to 15 minutes per mile. Okay, so within an hour, I can certainly jog, run, I'm going to say on average 4 or 5 miles within an hour. Of course, if I was pushing myself, I could get in a couple of more miles. But right now, I'm not there yet. And that's okay. So, and now, write like a scholar, Fieldnote, or writing what I like, Fieldnotes of a Black woman scholar. I'm going to have these conversations around what has been my methodology for, collective, what I'm framing now as collective healing, learning, and laboring. So remember, now I'm all of these things. I am a collective. I'm always in community with people, or I would say I'm in relationships with people who have dedicated themselves to healing. And I'm calling for healing in this podcast and being more mindful about how we learn, where do we learn, who are we learning with, and also how are we laboring. So those 3 spokes of healing, this is the hint, those 3 spokes of healing, learning, and laboring, is exactly what I've been learning more about over this last year or two, right? Since the pandemic. So ding ding ding, I just gave a hint. So moving forward, writing what I like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar, is that I am going to focus on this larger theme of collective healing, learning, and labor. Collective healing, learning, and labor. So I've learned a lot of lessons since the pandemic, and those lessons around how some of us are expected to endure. We're expected to be resilient. We are expected to still produce in harsh times. I'm not going to say the harshest of times, right? I am descendants of people who have survived certainly conditions that I would say are more directly harmful than what we are being asked to produce in and persist in. But I'm more interested in learning about, reflecting on, and talking about out loud, talking about honestly, right? How do we authentically and meaningfully heal, learn, and labor during these times, right? And so, yes, this is a resiliency process, but this is also a time when we can reflect on our own individual agency, but also collective agency. And I'll be honest and forthcoming, as I'm always am. Okay, so I try it's my best to be honest and forthcoming. I also am interested in how can we heal, learn, and labor as a form of resistance. So I'm interested in resilience, agency, and collective resistance in ways that are, mindful and caring and compassionate of all of humanity. And so I hope that you all, let me try to shorten up this discussion and wrap up this field note. But I hope that you all would join me, continue to join me on this journey. If you found me here now in this moment, this means that this series was meant for you. So the next set of episodes are going to focus on collective healing, learning, and laboring. And in particular, again, I'm going to talk about how I learned to persist and reimagine how I heal, learn, and labor. And I intentionally, I don't know if it was intentional. I mean, some of this is just, things, the universe bring things forth for you. Based off what you need at the time, even when you don't know you needed it. Okay, so some of the things that I needed over the last, few months, few years, is I needed to be in community. So jot that down in your notes. 1, how can we heal, learn, and labor collectively and individually? But how can we heal, learn, and labor in meaningful and authentic ways that align with our emotional and mental health needs, our physical needs, our spiritual and cultural needs. And I will add too our financial needs, because I do think we need to start talking more about economic justice if we're going to talk about freedom and liberation and the protection of humankind, right? Humanity. So tips, or I shouldn't say tips. So what worked for me? You can take them as tips, but what worked for me? So what works for me may or may not work for you. However, I do strongly suggest this focus, hence the purpose of the podcast. For me, I learned over the last few months and years to heal in community, to be a part of a larger community of like-minded people. Also, what worked for me, or is working for me, is focusing on play. And I mean play. I don't mean, extravagant vacations and travels because we want to post up on Instagram or we think that is good for our brand. I just mean old-fashioned play, the type of play that we began to be told around, the age of 12. You too big to be doing it. Or, you're not supposed to be doing that. You ain't no baby, right? But I'm talking, or you know what? You need to focus on math, science, and reading. So I just mean play. Like, find out what type of old-fashioned play your heart and your inner child desires. And finally, intentional workouts. So meaning working out to reconnect with my body, but also to disconnect from any expected outcomes that are in my control, right? So for me, working out or reconnecting with my body in meaningful ways, authentic ways, has worked for me. Okay, so thank you all for listening thus far. I hope that you do continue to tune in. I may be posting again some field notes on not just how I have chosen to collectively heal, learn, and labor, but also more conversations on how to re-spark creativity. So how to reimagine ourselves as creative people, because creativity is a form of agency. Creativity is a part of the healing process. And also creativity is excellent for reimagining ourselves as whole, healthy, wealthy human beings. Thank you. Again, my name is Dr. Venus Evans Winters, also known as Dr. V.